There's a lot of talk in Australia now about the ice epidemic, as it's been called. Now, there's no doubt that a lot of people in Australia are being harmed by ice, and there's a lot of harm that's occurring to families and also to communities. One of the questions that's most often asked is, do we have an ice epidemic? Well, epidemic is a very woolly term, but if we forget about the words and just focus on what's happened is that the use of ice may have gone up, but not hugely. What has happened that is quite dramatic is that there's been a big shift in recent years in Australia from low purity to high purity ice, and also from powder methamphetamine towards crystalline, or so-called ice form of methamphetamine. And those changes have meant that people have had much bigger impact from taking ice than they did before. And also there's been a big reduction in price. It doesn't seem as though many more people are using ice than before, but certainly those people who are using it are getting into all sorts of strife much earlier and much more severe strife. Question we have to ask ourselves is, why did Australia get an ice problem in the first place? Well, we got there thanks to having drug prohibition. And when we look around the world, we see that very often drug prohibition perversely encourages more dangerous drugs to replace less dangerous drugs. And we see, for example, with cannabis, that cannabis has been in many parts of the world, bush cannabis has been replaced by hydroponic cannabis, and that's then become something that people call skunk. And then an additional development was the availability of something that's called spice, a synthetic cannabis, and now there are many other forms of synthetic cannabis. We see with cocaine, not a big problem in Australia, but in other parts of the world we saw the powder cocaine problem morph into a problem with crack cocaine. And we see this with many other drugs, where more dangerous drugs or more dangerous routes of administration replace less dangerous drugs or less dangerous routes of administration. And unfortunately, this is part of the pattern of drug prohibition. If we want to stop the development of more dangerous drugs and more dangerous routes of administration, we should stop putting so much emphasis on drug law enforcement. That's what we have to do. What should we do about the ice epidemic in Australia? Well, the most important thing we can do is to improve treatment. How on earth are we going to make progress with ice in Australia when people have to wait for 6 months to get help? Not everybody needs help, but if people have got a severe problem and they can't fix it themselves and they want help, surely they should be able to get help as they can with any other health problem within a matter of days. That's what we should happen with the ice in Australia. It's salutary, I think, to note that the Prime Minister of Australia on the 29th of April 2014 said the war on drugs is a war that cannot be won, it's a war that can be lost. And he then continued, surprisingly, nevertheless we should keep on fighting it. Well, bravo to Tony Abbott for acknowledging something that no previous Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition in Australia had ever admitted. But surely if we realise the high and increasing cost of the failing with the war on drugs approach, then it's time to really think about Plan B. And Plan B is not doing more of the same. Plan B is going back to the drawing board and considering what the other realistic options are. The most important thing we can do for the ice epidemic is to increase the quantity of treatment available and improve its quality. Thank you.